All right, well, let's get right into it. We're going to explore something that on the surface seems kind of impossible. How a really old, really strict theological system, Calvinism, made this huge, unexpected comeback in the 21st century. People call it the New Calvinism, and its story is just fascinating. It's all about old ideas finding new life in very, very modern places.
So this whole thing really burst into the public eye back in 2009. Out of seemingly nowhere, Time magazine, puts New Calvinism on its list of 10 ideas changing the world. It was right up there with other big recession-era trends. And while a lot of those other ideas kind of faded away, this one had staying power. It really made people sit up and wonder how this old-school faith suddenly seemed so relevant.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it's a total paradox. See, the conventional wisdom from historians was always that Calvinism dies out in places that are prosperous and modern. It was supposed to be a faith for people on the fringes, not for confident, successful city dwellers. But what happened? The exact opposite. New Calvinism absolutely exploded in the very places it was supposed to go extinct.
So, you have to ask the question, right? How on earth did a belief system from the 16th century become one of the biggest success stories in modern American religion? That's what we're going to unpack.
Okay, first things first. Who exactly are we talking about here? Because the New Calvinism isn't just a simple reboot of the old stuff. It's its own thing, a movement that pulls heavily from the past, sure, but has a uniquely modern identity and a whole different way of operating.
You know, this didn't just pop up overnight. The groundwork was laid decades ago. Back in the 50s, a publisher started reprinting old Puritan books. Then, in the 80s and 90s, you get this wave of really important books and the launch of these big online ministries that weren't tied to any single denomination. It all built up to 2006, when a magazine article finally gave it a name that stuck: The Young, Restless, and Reformed.
So what makes this movement tick? Well, think of it like this. Its DNA is evangelical. It's all about the Bible and having a personal conversion experience. But its skeleton is totally modern. It's built around websites and media networks, not old church hierarchies. It also kind of picks and chooses which parts of the old Reformed tradition it wants to emphasize. A huge one is its view on gender roles, which is called complementarianism. We'll get to that in a sec. But the two things that really made it explode were its push into brand new cultural spaces and this deep, deep spiritual vibe it borrowed from the Puritans.
Right, that word, complementarianism. It's a big one for understanding this movement. It's the belief that men and women are created equal, same worth, same value, but they're designed for different or complementary roles. And in this view, men are specifically called to take on the leadership roles both in the family and in the church. This isn't a side issue for them, it's a core part of their identity.
Okay, let's talk about the first huge, game-changing strategy of this movement. It's geography. For a long, long time, American Calvinism was kind of tucked away in rural areas, in small, tight-knit communities. New Calvinism just completely flipped that script. It made a deliberate, aggressive push into the biggest, most influential cities in the world.
I mean, look at Marshall Church in Seattle. Now, it famously imploded later on, but for a while, it was drawing thousands of young people. We're talking tattoos, piercings, the whole 9 yards, in one of the most secular, least church-going cities in America. It proved that this theology could actually be seen as cool and countercultural.
Then you've got a totally different scene in Washington, D.C. At Capitol Hill Baptist, Pastor Mark Dever took this old dying church and turned it into this bustling hub for hundreds of young, super smart professionals, congressional aides, government workers, you name it, right in the heart of the nation's capital.
But the one that really became the poster child for this whole strategy, Redeemer Presbyterian in New York City. Pastor Tim Keller basically designed a church from the ground up to connect with skeptical, ambitious, young professionals in Manhattan. It was intellectually rigorous, culturally savvy, and it became a massive success. It was proof that a conservative faith could actually thrive in a global megacity.
And this quote from Tim Keller just nails the entire philosophy. The thinking was, if you want to shape culture, you can't do it from the sidelines. You have to go where culture is being made, and that's in the cities.
And look, this wasn't just a flash in the pan at a few high-profile churches. You can actually see the numbers. Within the Southern Baptist Convention, the biggest Protestant group in America, the percentage of pastors identifying with core Calvinist beliefs jumped pretty significantly in just 6 years. It was a real, measurable shift, especially among the younger generation of leaders.
So we've covered the where, but what about the what? What was the actual appeal?
Well, the second big innovation was digging up the spiritual playbook of the 17th century Puritans. And this wasn't just about boring theology. It was about offering a faith that fired up both your heart and your mind. You have to understand, this movement rose up at a time when a lot of young evangelicals were just tired of their own churches. They felt things had become shallow, all about seeker-friendly marketing and rock band worship, but not a lot of substance. New Calvinism came along and offered the complete opposite, a faith that was deep, demanding, and intellectually satisfying.
And they found that substance by reviving these old Puritan study habits, just with a modern twist. The whole culture revolves around the sermon. You go and listen to a long, detailed teaching, you take notes like you're in a college lecture, then you talk about it with your friends during the week. And here's the 21st century part. You download the podcast and listen to it again. It's this whole ecosystem of deep, serious engagement.
And if you want to point to one person, one single historical figure who is the North Star for this whole thing, it's Jonathan Edwards. He was this brilliant pastor and theologian in 18th century New England, and he's easily the most important influence on the movement. He's their model for how to blend brainy, rigorous thinking with passionate, heartfelt emotion.
You can really feel how personal this is when you hear leaders like John Piper, who's a giant in this movement, talk about reading Edwards. He says it convicted him of being lukewarm and gave him this intense passion for God. For these guys, Edwards isn't some dusty figure in a history book. He's a living, breathing guide for their spiritual lives.
So you put it all together, and it's a massive success story, right? They revived an old faith, they planted in new places, and they genuinely changed the face of American evangelicalism. But after all that growth, the movement is now facing a future that looks a whole lot more complicated.
Yeah, there are some pretty serious storms on the horizon. For one, the founding generation of leaders is retiring, and some of the biggest names have been brought down by scandal, leaving a huge leadership vacuum. Internally, the movement is starting to fracture over really tough social issues. And from the outside, they're facing the same pressures everyone else is, a more secular culture and intense political division. And maybe the biggest threat of all is just success. As their ideas go mainstream, will they lose that edgy, distinctive feel that made them so appealing in the first place?
So here's the bottom line. This movement pulled off a pretty remarkable comeback and really did reshape a huge slice of American religion. But the big question now is whether it can last. Can this new traditionalism, which was so good at adapting to the world of the early 2000s, survive the massive challenges of a world that is changing faster than ever? Honestly, that's the story that's yet to be written.